Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. I am so happy to know most of you. My name is Jen Lawrence, and I'm the Executive Director of the Sasaki Foundation. To remind myself to do this. Welcome to our final presentations. It has been an incredible year. It's my first year watching a full cycle, so that has been so much fun. And it was our first year back in person. So thank you for going with us on this journey in our beautiful new space. We really, really appreciate it. So first, we would like to start by acknowledging the land on which we are meeting today. This land is the territory of the Massachusetts, Pawtucket, and their neighbors, the Wampanoag, and the Nipmuc peoples, who have stewarded this land for hundreds of generations. We recognize the repeated violations of sovereignty, territory, and water perpetrated by invaders that have impacted the original inhabitants of this land for 400 years. We extend our respect to citizens of these nations who live here today and their ancestors who have lived here for over 500 generations, and to all Indigenous people. We also affirm that this acknowledgement is not sufficient. It does not undo the harm that has been done and continues to be perpetrated now against Indigenous people, their land, and water. And I'd also like to take a minute to thank our staff and our board who are here with us online. Thank you. We are really honored that you would work with us. So thank you for allowing us to go on this journey. So now I'm gonna give the really fun stuff logistically. So when you're speaking, speak directly into the top. You can advance right on here. There's a back and a forward button. You can also advance right on the computer. Can you see us? Yeah. Oh, okay. Sorry for folks online who could not see us. Thank you. Okay, great. So the restrooms right around the corner. If you need to take a phone call or anything, talk with somebody, please go around the corner by the elevators so that folks in here will be able to hear the presentations. And there will be lots of time for questions. So feel free to ask questions. And if you're presenting, ask questions about what you're presenting if you'd like some feedback. This final presentation is meant to be sort of like a beginning to the next phase of these projects. So this is a space to learn, to gather advice, to get some feedback, to practice your next pitch to wherever it might be. So use it as that. That would be fine and we would love it. Also, trying to think if there are any other logistics. There are not. Let me make sure. Oh, Anna, how do I go back? Do you know how I go back to make it so that I can make this move? We have two screens. Oh, awesome. Thank you. Perfect. So who are we? The Sasaki Foundation is a nonprofit organization based here in Boston, and we believe that power has the design has the power to change, to make change, and that it belongs to all. We believe that we can address the most urgent challenges in our communities, and that often those communities do not have access to the design skill sets and tools that live within this building. So the design grants are one of our programs that allow us to open up that world of design. We do this in 3 ways. Our research is what we call our design grants. Then we also have community learning engagement through public programming, such as our event coming up in 4 weeks on July 26th. And it's the Erasure of Indigenous Peoples by Design, right here in this room, as well as online. Please join us, it's free. The speakers are incredible and really impactful members of the community, and I'm really excited to learn from them. And then we have professional practice and growth, where we focus on design education. If you're working on the SEED program this summer, please raise your hands. We have lots of folks here working on SEED. It's our summer experiential experience in design. That's something. Experiential, da, 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 da. Sorry, folks, I'm really, really tired. We are really excited this summer to be bringing on 44 high school students and 8 college-age interns. So it's going to be a fantastic summer. Please join us throughout. And what did we focus our grants on this past cycle? We looked at creative community building, new models for housing, innovation in transit and access to mobility choices, innovation in health and well-being, and proactive approaches to climate adaptation. And you're going to learn today how all of these folks in the room were able to work through these. So without further ado, I believe we turn it right over to the Chinatown team. Did you know you were going first? Because it's very exciting. Come on up. Remember, speak right in here. Big round of applause.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maisie, and I'm with an organization called Climbable. I'm here with my colleague, Caroline, and our project partners, Sari and Lydia from Chinatown Community Land Trust and Chinatown Power. And we are the Chinatown Energy Literacy Campaign project. So our project had a number of different components to it, but our main overall goal was to create an energy literacy campaign that covered issues that are important to the Chinatown community. We did this in order to connect environmental conditions and injustices to energy topics and environmental issues that the community faces, as well as the health risks that those entail. We also wanted to inform residents about actions that they can take on their own to mitigate these risks for themselves and the community. And finally, to inform residents about actions that we are all working on, mainly our Chinatown partners, to address these issues on a more systemic level. These projects include an open space planning, expansion, and improvement project, and a clean energy microgrid, which we will talk about in a little bit. But first, I'm going to pass it to Caroline to talk about why Chinatown.
Hi, everyone. So the reason why we are focusing on Chinatown is because Chinatown is the hottest neighborhood in Boston. As you can see by this heat map, the daytime air temperature in the Chinatown area, this is actually from Sasaki. Also, 88% of neighborhood land is paved on or built. So that means there's very little green space. It also has a big threat by flooding due to the location. As you can see, the flooding scenario, sea level rise by 2050 and major storm surge. And also, Chinatown has the worst air quality in Massachusetts.
And so in terms of the residents, most of the residents are renters, which has a big impact on the things that they're able to access and other issues there. And many live below the poverty line, and there's a large amount of language isolation, meaning residents speak little to no English and so have a hard time accessing emergency notifications or services through the state and the city. This right side here is through a survey that our partners did, and we found that 91% don't know where to go during an emergency. Many don't have a plan for their household in an emergency situation or have anywhere to go even outside of an emergency location that's city designated. And so these are some things that we were seeking to address through our 2 projects we talked about, which I will pass over to Suri.
Yeah, so this board we developed with volunteers from Sasaki, and it kind of shows on the left the existing environment, and then on the right some of the solutions that we're working on to try and improve the environmental conditions in Chinatown. So one of those is developing a clean virtual microgrid. Now what a microgrid is essentially a local means of electric generation. In our case, we're pursuing solar panels and battery storage. And so currently we're working with 8 buildings around Chinatown to implement these solutions along with other energy efficiency improvements, heat pump installations, and so on. And so this board kind of details, some of the benefits that those things bring, like improved air quality, improved comfort, by being able to control their heating and whatnot, and then improving the resilience of the neighborhood by installing more backup generation in case there's a grid outage, and reducing fossil fuel emissions.
And I think as we, while this project was initially conceived as an energy literacy campaign, by Climbable as our microgrid partner, we quickly saw that, when we talk about environmental issues and environmental justice in Chinatown, that there are a lot of, it's not just about energy, but there are a lot of different aspects to environmental justice. So, and we feel like this board is a really good way for us to help talk about some of those issues with people in the community. This is the English version, but there's the final is a bilingual version. And, and at the same time, the reels that we've created through our campaign are kind of like a simple and quick way to get people thinking about some of these issues. So, our work in Chinatown involves the microgrid, to address clean energy, decarbonization, and resilience. But it also involves work to advocate for more green infrastructure. And, particularly because Chinatown is a heat island, it's, we are very focused on improving and expanding open and green space in Chinatown, including working with different agencies around access to gardening and, just involving people in that kind of community planning and thinking about how is it that we want to develop the community in the future.
So yeah, we started by holding some focus groups in around Chinatown, kind of framing it around some of the issues that they're facing, asking them about their experience paying their bills, walking through electric bills and what all of this stuff actually means. And then kind of, having a conversation with them about the history of Chinatown, about how, the built up environment contributes to the environmental factors they're facing and so on. And so based on our, our conversations with these residents, we started to put together the informational reels that we've produced as part of this project.
Yeah, and I think that, when in talking about environmental justice, we felt that it wasn't enough to just talk about, we're the hottest place in Chinatown. We are the most susceptible to flooding. These are the factors, but it's also like, how did we get there? And that's where the concept of environmental justice and injustice really comes in. So often we would start these conversations with some of that history to help people understand, like, this is how we got here, because, this was an unwanted area. And so nobody was thinking about the quality of life here. It was, meant to be, for people who are brought in to do the manual labor that, nobody wanted to do. And, we're mostly immigrant workers from the 1800s on. It's because this was reclaimed land. And this, our neighborhood was never zoned as a residential neighborhood. It was just seen as industrial, et cetera.
And so from these community workshops and meetings, we were able to come up with a list of topics that we thought were important for the community to know about. And so we used Canva and used visuals, as you can see here, and plain language to explain a series of topics that range from what is environmental justice, historical environmental injustices in Chinatown, air quality, flood risk, heat risk, the importance of open space and greenery, health impacts of environmental harms, energy affordability, and what are microgrids. And so, as you can see, we use different visuals and we use technical translation to develop these materials so that they are easy to understand in both English and written Chinese. And we went through rounds of review with, as a team, to ensure that the images and the text was in line with the Chinatown community, and it represented the people that live there, the problems that they're facing, and the impacts, and also that they could understand it, because really these materials are for them.
And so through our multiple efforts, we've really built up some awareness around these various topics, and more so about what can be done to address them at a personal level, at a community level, and so on. We've expanded advocacy work and expanded participation in our advocacy work, and raised awareness for the different ways that people can continue to be involved with our various efforts. The open, as I think we've already heard, there's some more open space planning going on, and I'll let you both talk about that. But yeah, for the microgrid, we've learned a lot about what designs would work best for residents, what are the important buildings to include in it, and we hope to be able to continue this progress with our reels and other informational materials. But we've already been able to see an impact before we've even started to roll these out. So that's been great.
Yeah, so I think that, one of the impacts certainly is getting people more aware of the environmental justice issues. We were able to use some of our educational materials in our workshops and prepare people for an environmental justice hearing in Chinatown that was held last fall. We're also going to be hosting the new environmental justice undersecretary from who came out of Green Roots in a conversation with residents later this summer. And one of the, in addition to people becoming more aware of the microgrid, us being able to go and talk to them about the potential design for their buildings and what it might mean for them. We're also involving people in talking about green spaces that could be improved or expanded in Chinatown, including the Reggie Wong Park, which is right over on Nealon Street, where we are now starting to have a community lease of that land in order to protect the park and add a small children's playground. And the space that's right outside the window here, Phillips Square, where we're going to be working, we think together with Sasaki in the future with other Chinatown agencies to advocate for that space to be turned into a really beautiful park space.
And so our next steps, as we heard earlier, this is just a beginning. And so our next steps will include rolling out our reels throughout the summer and beyond, especially in the lead up to other events that connect to these topics, such as extreme heat. There'll be an event later this summer. And so to build awareness and excitement for those events, we'll release our informational reels. We're also going to publish a website that we are working on with a Sasaki volunteer where our reels will live, and it will build up eventually to become a resource hub with other important information and emergency preparedness support. We'll continue, or there'll be work this summer with the Sasaki volunteers, as Lydia just mentioned, on this community-based open space planning, which is very exciting. And we'll just continue to develop and expand our community microgrid project, our engagement with community members across these efforts, more. So yeah, that's all very exciting. And thank you all for listening.
That was so nice to see. Does anybody have any questions? We've got a little bit of time. Yeah.
I'm curious, that was great. I love seeing all your visuals, and I'm curious about the reels. Where did that name, like, is there something different than a brochure about them, or how come they're called, can you tell us a little more about why they're called reels or what the story is?
So I believe we've done a similar project with the city of Cambridge, and I believe the format on Canva is like Instagram Reels. However, they are like transferable formats. They can be printed, they can be on a website digitally. It's essentially like each one is just like a series of like 5 to 10 squares. And yeah, we just call them reels.
It's a little confusing now with, yeah, a little confusing now that Instagram has reels, but yeah, they're more for like the feed of Instagram rather than the video reels.
Yeah.
We can also use them on WeChat, which is the popular Chinese social media.
Have these materials been distributed to the community, and how have they been received by the community?
So we haven't distributed them or posted them yet, but we did show some of them at our most recent workshop. And, you know, I think it was very helpful. You know, they're very simple and kind of help people understand the things that we were talking about.
Other questions? I was lucky enough in my past professional life, I worked on that Cambridge project and people loved them. They absolutely, we did them in 8 different languages, I think. And it was our, I mean, social media is social media, but it was our highest engagement on social media. So, great job. That was fantastic. Thank you so much. And now we have combating green gentrification. And remember, keep it up here and I'll remind you if it's wandering.
Thank you.
Do I just press? Oh, on this thing. Oh, fancy. Oh, cool. Cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Bianca Bowman. I am the Climate Justice Coordinator at Green Roots.
And I'm Caroline Ellenbird, and I direct the Comunidades Enraizadas Community Land Trust in Chelsea, which means rooted communities. And we kind of grew in partnership and through the support of Green Roots.
Yeah, I'm very lucky to have worked with Caroline before she started technically as the Comunidades Enraizadas person. She used to be at Green Roots, and now she directs the land trust. So very cool. So just to give a little bit of background around Chelsea, Massachusetts, that is where both of our organizations are located. It's the smallest city in Mass. It's about 2.5 square miles, and it's very densely populated. We're also an environmental justice community and a very high population of immigrants. We are majority Latine or Latinx community, with also, similar to Chinatown, a very high amount of language isolation. So majority of our residents speak Spanish or another language. We also have a very diverse array of immigrants in Chelsea that aren't just Spanish speaking. And then neighboring East Boston is similar. So Green Roots does work in both Chelsea and East Boston, and Comunidades Enraizadas is based in Chelsea. So one of the reasons that we conceived of this project is due to the fact that Chelsea also only has about 2% tree canopy in the city of Chelsea. So we have a lot of issues with urban heat. We're a pretty extreme urban heat island. We also have very little green space. Similar to what Lydia was talking about with Chinatown, we're built as an industrial community, and there are a lot of very high industrial burdens that we face and host in the city of Chelsea. So a lot of oil tanks. As you can see, the Tobin Bridge goes right over the city and cuts through the city. Under the Tobin Bridge, there are plenty of residences, there are houses, there are schools, playgrounds, and around the city, there's large salt piles. Most of our waterfront is taken up by industrial use. So we think a lot about space at Green Roots, and of course at Comunidades Enraizadas. So, so a little bit more about Green Roots. We are an environmental justice organization, and we just work to improve quality of life in the city of Chelsea and East Boston for our residents, and do both work hyper locally, a lot of organizing around transit justice, climate justice, health equity, and youth leadership, and kind of see all of those under the umbrella of environmental justice. And then Comunidades Enraizadas. Okay.
Yeah, so comunidades enraizadas, this is, here we are along the Chelsea Creek celebrating, this is when we were celebrating the transition from a team of devoted immigrant housing activists, mostly from Honduras, mostly women who had been working for now over 15 years with the idea of creating some sort of a housing cooperative, land cooperative. And this is 2 years ago, I guess, we made the decision with Green Roots to create a new nonprofit. So our mission is to obtain and permanently secure land in Chelsea for the use and benefit of the community, so that low-income people, regardless of their immigration status, can achieve long-term housing stability and be stewards of the land. So there's sort of two layers, right? One is trying to get land into the hands of the community, out of the speculative market. The same forces that Lydia described that made Chelsea an environmental justice community, right, are also the same forces that have set it up to be very, very vulnerable to speculative real estate development. And so this is why Green Roots, as an environmental justice organization, why we work so closely. If you can't stay, you fight for environmental justice and you can't stay, that's a problem. So we want to get the land out of the speculative market, and we want to put it into community uses. It might be that a patch of land is best for a garden, but the priority for our group, when possible, is housing. So yeah, start there, thanks. So as I kind of alluded to in this last question, there's this issue of green gentrification. And this is the idea, if you make your your community beautiful, it becomes more livable and more desirable. So we presented these questions, how do we make our city greener without displacing the people who call it home? And how can we make homes healthier without displacing residents? This is one of the Green Roots farm, community farm. This is the housing stock in Chelsea. We did a presentation once on green gentrification where we found a real estate listing for the house next to a community garden. And, they picture the community garden as a benefit to raise the value of that home. So what do you do? And so this is what brought us, so our grant here is an exploratory grant, sort of we were exploring a theme. It was sort of the lowest level of the grant tiers, but we were able to do that. And we said, well, what about green roofs? Because if you could put a green roof on a community land trust home that is permanently affordable, then both there's a community benefit of that, and then there's also potential benefit to the homeowner without raising the value of the house and pricing people out. So we decided to explore that with our exploratory grant. And that's
yeah, so exactly as Caroline was saying, a big part of this was to work with people who are interested in maintaining affordable housing, and that we wanted to center community members and the residents who are focused on these issues. So our first step was to educate ourselves about green roofs as well as community members. So a big part of this project was both being able to take the time to really dig in and say, I didn't know much about green roofs before we made the time to do this. And then also be able to connect with people at Sasaki who have experience with green roofs and with building them or designing them. So we started by just speaking. This is a community land trust meeting where our intern, Jack, who's unable to be here today, and me and Caroline all talked about green roofs and basically just introduced the idea to folks and just wanted to hear their thoughts and opinions and kind of what came up for them immediately when we did this. And we got some really great feedback. People were excited about the idea of permanently accessible green space. And people also brought up concerns. There were a lot of questions. People have various different backgrounds in the community, and some involving construction came up to us and raised concerns. Plants will often can potentially ruin a house or a wall, or we've seen how ivy can really get into the cracks. So people were really concerned about those things. So we found basically that we had a lot more research to do and a lot more questions to answer. And that really helped us understand how we wanted to present this information and make this information available to the community. So next we started collaborating with Sasaki, city planners in the city of Chelsea, and other partners that are working with both the Community Land Trust and Green Roots to kind of figure out where we wanted to go from here, knowing that we didn't necessarily have a particular ability to design and implement a green roof immediately. We wanted to make sure there was more time and room to continue giving information to community members, and also gaining more information ourselves and understanding what was the best and most equitable way to present this information to people. We really wanted to make sure this wasn't, you know, here's a green roof, it's really good, you should want this. You know, we wanted to make sure that people were bringing their lived experiences to understanding and making a potential decision. And so that's kind of how we, I think, moved forward with this project, is how do we present information so that people have truly all of the information to say, you know, is a green roof something, if I'm going to be a future homeowner of a community land trust property, in a community land trust property, how am I able to best make this decision on whether, you know, I'm willing to deal with the maintenance costs and the potential just costs involved really with having a green roof. So am I still going, or do you know if it's, yeah. Okay, great. So then the next step that we took was to create more information to present to the community and create a more interactive activity to gain feedback. So we wanted to, so this is again a picture of Jack in multiple settings beginning to present green roofs in Chelsea and kind of talking in understandable terms as much as possible about the costs and benefits of green roofs, you know, how they're built, as much as we can give information, understandable information about the layers that it takes to implement a green roof, what you actually, how you would need to retrofit a home, how you would need to prepare a new home. And then also kind of a creative design activity around what a green roof could look like on a house or a multi-layer building.
That this is a movable, these are all little movable pieces, so people could come and design their own green roof, which was lots of fun. And this is, you know, this is our final, you know, we haven't finalized, but of our Sasaki poster. You know, and when we were in here midway, we sort of realized, wait a sec, what do we want to use a poster for? And one of the things is most of our members are not on computers. Many of our members are not particularly literate necessarily, or, you know, it's more, and so we thought, wow, here we have an opportunity to have a physical board made with people who are designers, right? So image heavy. And so we decided that the goal of our board would be to have something that we can use when talking to the community. And so we realized we probably should have zoomed in on some of these for you all, but on the left, there's the permeability. Like, I don't know if you can tell, but this is almost entirely purple. And there's some little spots of green, right? The purple is non-permeable and the green is our open space. The heat, you know, Chelsea is a heat island, and then below the flooding, similar, right? Similar to what you saw for Chinatown. In the middle is our beautiful Sasaki. Is Yilun here today? Are you? No. So the beautiful drawing showing the difference between an extensive green roof and an intensive green roof, giving us something we can talk with people about. You know, an image of a community land trust. Again, it's image-based. We're going to be there. We can talk about it, right? But we wanted to get as many words off of this as we can. And then benefits of green roofs. You know, this shows the heat of the black roof versus of these green roofs. Open space in a city increased with green roofs. And then, you know, a range of heat and different models going on there. And then in the middle, this was the key part, which is the considerations, right? We want, as we talk with people, to say, would you want this, right? Chelsea has the burden of most, like, of the road salt, of the oil, right? We shoulder a lot of the regional burden of the gray infrastructure, And we don't want to ask people to shoulder the burden, homeowners to shoulder, who are first time, low income, to shoulder the burden of community benefits too. So we want to, it's, you know, but what we found was, you know, that roofs apparently can last indefinitely if they have a green roof over them. That's a real benefit to a homeowner, right? There's insulation benefits, noise. We were right under the Logan Airport flight paths. But there's upkeep. There's the cost of installation, which we would hope are, you know, next steps to be able to find help with that. You know, and you have to be aware of the extra weight on the roof as you design it and so forth. But so this is our working poster, and we're really excited. We really look forward to having the physical version of this to share and use. So next steps, continue sharing with and learning from community members around the potential role of green roofs on community land trust homes using that poster and our other hands-on items. Conversations with development partners about logistics and benefits of installing green roofs. So we feel like we're really at a place, we've gotten to a place where we can start having conversations with our development partners about what would this look like? Could we do this? And also outreach to potential funders and green roof and construction professionals. So, you know, in conclusion here, again, this was an exploratory grant, and I think the biggest thing we're taking out of it is that we have brought, that green roofs are now in our conversation, right? I think there's a reasonable chance that we don't have a building yet, we don't have land yet, but we are awaiting. We should on Tuesday finally hear from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund a vote as to whether we can have our first property from the city of Chelsea and develop it in partnership with Habitat for Humanity of Greater Boston. So it's real, right? These are real conversations. So because of this grant, we are going to bring that into conversations. The initial idea was, no, that's too expensive. That's not realistic. So I feel like we're in a position where we might be able to push that conversation a little further. This was at Comunidades Enraizadas' first annual meeting last fall. And you can see the energy of our group. We're excited to move forward. And it's been great working with Sasaki and all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. That was fantastic to see all of that together in one. Do we have any questions? All right, lots. I'm going to start with Sabia, and then I'll go back to Carrie.
This was awesome. Thank you for presenting. I was wondering, what is the idea to implement green roofs on existing buildings, or is this thinking about new development?
Good question. We would explore it for, you know, the land trust is open to acquiring either land to develop on or existing buildings. You know, what we understand is that it's easier to get it in there at development. Our first project is likely to be a new development. So, you know, we will explore it in that context first, but we would be open. And this is part of the idea of the intensive versus the extensive, you know, is the weight and the infrastructure that's needed for the, you know, sort of for the lighter touch green roof that's less usable, but still offers a lot of the benefits. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for presenting. It was great. I was wondering, with the poster that you created, where exactly do you think you're going to showcase it so like as many people as possible can see it?
We'll have it in our office, you know, which is actually a place people come through. So I think, again, because it's a physical, tangible thing, but I would imagine we would take it with us to tabling events, you know, other, you know, maybe have it in the conference room or, you know, just to use it as, and I think also to put it on the websites in its digital form.
Yeah, I think that one thing that's been really fun about this project is that since I'm the overseer of all the climate work at Green Roots, not all, but a lot of it. And kind of one of our biggest goals is just to have people have more access to cooling, green, and open spaces. And I feel like this was an opportunity to be really creative about what that means and what those opportunities might be. So from my perspective, I feel like the more we bring this to community events, bring this to meetings, and then this can also be used as a tool, as we had mentioned before, for potential funders, because you know, even though it's pretty simple and it doesn't explain a ton, it's just like really brings you kind of through the reasons and the idea, and then the benefits and costs. So I feel like that's been really useful, just to think of this as a visual tool. Yeah.
I was just thinking this, I don't know if you looked into this at all, but I'm curious because there's such a push for solar panels to be on houses, but they're also dark. So how, like, having solar panels on top of the green roofs cancel out some of that benefit because of the color and the darkness that it brings?
That's a great question. Sari might know the answer to that. Yeah, so Sari said if there's airflow underneath the surface, apparently it shades the roof and so it doesn't absorb as much heat, right? I don't know about like albedo, so in terms of color, but we also talked about how solar panels or green roofs can also sometimes make solar panels more efficient. Sari actually also told me that, so I don't have the background.
Future collaboration. We also, the team didn't mention it, but they've been talking to green roof companies too to find out this, because the potential partner on this piece of land that you might find out about next week asked the same questions. Did I see another hand? Any other questions? Great, thank you. This was wonderful. All right, Groundwork Somerville, come on up. And I'll do my obligatory reminder, speak right in.
Great, yeah. So welcome everyone. We're so excited to be here. My name is Jessie Delano. I'm the board president of Groundwork Somerville, and this is my fellow board member, Jerry Medina. And we are so excited to present today. We have quite the challenge on our hands, and Sasaki's been, just their insight on our challenge was priceless, and our next steps are much clearer than they were before. So I'm here to talk about Groundwork Somerville. Groundwork Somerville is a nonprofit organization that's been changing places and changing lives in Somerville, Massachusetts since 2000. Our mission is to cultivate the next generation of environmental leaders to grow a greener and more equitable Somerville. We work with Somerville teenagers on our green team. We teach and tend to the Somerville Public School gardens. And most importantly, we're stewards of Somerville's only urban farm, South Street Farm. The farm is a quarter of an acre, and we grow produce for the community, employ around 15 teenagers every summer in green jobs, carry out K through 12 field trips at the farm as well, and involve our community in their local food systems through community events and volunteering. We have had South Street Farm since 2011, so we've been stewards of the land for 12 years, and unfortunately our time there is coming to an end due to some changes in the neighborhood. We can go to the next slide. So we've heard a lot about gentrification today. We are in the same boat as many of you. So here is the area, the red box right here is our current farm. This is the first building that's going up, and there's a second one being built right now. It's about the same size as that current farm. And unfortunately, due to all the changes in the neighborhood, the farm will be displaced because of this new development. As you can see, the green line was just extended to about a 10-minute walk away from our farm. And the development you see here on the screen is known as Boynton Yards. It's a multi-phase development plan with currently 5 buildings approved and many more in the works. And unfortunately for us especially, we are right in the middle of it. The junkyard behind us with all those cars, that's been sold. Everything has sort of been acquired by this company. And because it's a multi-phase plan, it's going to take many, many years, and there's no clear timeline. There's many different stakeholders involved in this as well. We work with the city. We've had a long relationship with the city. They awarded us to be stewards of the land in 2011. So they're a major player in this. And Boynton Yards has agreed to reserve some space for us. We have 2 sites that Jerry's going to speak more into the specifics of those sites for us, but essentially with all these stakeholders, with the multi-year plan, we're having a big challenges getting to the table. We're sort of, a small nonprofit with this urban farm. You should see us, we're right in a junkyard. We're having a lot of trouble advocating for ourselves, and without the clear timeline, with so many different stakeholders, they are involving the community in some capacity, but nothing has been established or planned, so it's all very up in the air. But the real takeaway is there's no permanent home for us. We're Somerville's only urban farm, and there's no permanent home for us at this moment, kind of leaving us in this very anxious spot as a small nonprofit. So we can go to the next slide. So here's a nice visual of the farm. I just want to emphasize that we are going to be forced to move, but we have so much support. The city supports us. Boynton Yards has supported us. Everyone wants to find a space for us. The problem is we don't have a plan, and without a spot at the table, it's hard to advocate for ourselves with very little power in this mix. So, and as you can see, we're literally rooted in place. There's many logistical issues with moving a farm and acquiring land, as you all know. So yeah, we're choosing this opportunity to really see what we can do with it. We can design a new space. And we've partnered with Sasaki in this presentation to really think through all the elements that we need on the farm and how we can change the sort of crisis that we're experiencing into a very positive experience for the residents of Somerville and really build back stronger. Next slide. So here is our proposed new space. It's absolutely beautiful and incorporates a lot of things that we previously had, things that we envisioned with the team. When you're designing a farm, you think about all the things you have and all the things you desperately want. And we have the opportunity to think through that at this point. As you can see, we have crops over there. We need just as much. We can't reduce in our yield, so we need just as many beds as we had at our 1/4 of an acre existing farm. We've never had a farm stand before. That's something that we have envisioned to have a direct access. All of our produce goes to the Somerville mobile market, so it goes directly to the consumers, but we don't have a spot on the farm to sell it. Let's see, we have our pollinator gardens. We have an educational space. We host many field trips and environmental justice workshops and many things on the farm that require that space. We have a small greenhouse currently. We'll see, Jerry will talk about the sites, but we don't know how big the new farm will be. We're kind of creating a project with very little details. Yeah, so this is a visual of our current space. As you can see, we sort of have, this is South Street 1 and South Street 2, and South Street is sort of the line that you're looking on. So this is everything we currently have. We have made great use of the space in the time that we've been there. Many of our green team members have been involved this whole time with constructing the farm. We have all of our beds laid out. We sort of outlined what we currently have. And if we go to the next slide, all the things that we want to expand upon and really design in this new space. So we have raised beds on there. We could use more of those. There's a high demand for food in our area. A wash station is something we haven't had. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. All these sort of elements that we've really put in a lot of thought to think that we need in the new space. So in addition to our work with Sasaki, which Jerry will go through in just a second, we've also done some work in the past with, this is the MIT Design for America program in 2022. So they designed a wash station for us. Part of sort of the anxiety of this whole thing is we're a nonprofit. We're thinking about funding for years going forward. We don't know who's going to pay for the new site. We don't know how we're going to, when it's going to happen. We can't fundraise for it. We don't know what to tell our funders. So we're starting to think of things that could be portable, that could move to the new farm space. So a wash station is one of those. And we actually just got funding for this through our ARPA funding. We also have these farm raised barrels. We can talk more about that if we have time later too. But yeah, next slide.
All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that we did with Sasaki. So here, this is a visual of the 2
potential relocation sites that the developer, Boynton Yards, identified as part of their master plans where we could potentially move. And so we thought through this opportunity with Sasaki that we could do some work around evaluating both of these sites to see if there's a more optimal site for us to essentially relocate to. And in order to do that, we work with Sasaki designers to assess several different conditions that were relevant to us as an urban farm that's growing food for our community. So the first condition we wanted to look at was accessibility. So we foremost are serving our community. We work with youth, we work with immigrants, multiracial communities of Somerville, and wanted to make sure that this was a site that would be the most accessible to our community. We also looked at environmental conditions, again, as an urban farm that we're growing food at. We had to think about things like wind, pollution, and sunlight. So with Sasaki designers, we did a series of rudimentary study sites looking at all of these various conditions. Thanks. So I know that we showed a little bit of where we're located, but we want to just like show the aerial view of where we're at. So as you can see, South Street Farm is the little green area here in kind of a sea of a lot of industry. Jesse mentioned we are literally next to a junkyard. And then all of the construction that Boynton Yards is going to be doing is going to be just to the north of our current site. I'm going to go. And then this is an aerial view of the proposed future farm sites. So where the first site that we see here, South Street site, it's going to be on the same street. However, the street is going to actually be shifted. So currently we're kind of in like just above, this little like triangular shape. That's where the current South Street is. It's going to be redeveloped and made more south and straight. And the proposed South Street site is just to the south of it, of the current farm site, where that junkyard area is. And then there's a potential to also be assigned or relocated to what we're calling the Harding Street site, which is to the east and north of where all of the new ongoing construction is happening, which, as you can see, borders the new Green Line extension train line. And here is a visual that was created to show the actual development, the actual master plan by Boynton Yards to depict buildings that are actually currently being built, ones that are proposed that are in the master plan. We anticipate that they would be built in the next 10 to 15 years. And then we have our groundwork Somerville sites and, or rather existing development that is going to remain and is there. So with Sasaki designers, we were able to first look at accessibility across both of these two proposed sites. And what we found was that they're actually pretty similar in accessibility when you think about how easy it is to reach by walking, by public transit, by biking. They're about both a half mile from the Green Line stop and buses and things like that. However, that new proposed South Street site is the one that's going to have more street frontage. So it's directly right on that street. It's facing a lot of the development, businesses, things like that, that Boynton Yards is currently developing. And so we envision with more street frontage, it actually is an opportunity for us to experience more foot traffic. So that is, we think, an added benefit because it's more visible. Right? It's inviting residents, it's inviting folks that are passing our space. It can invite folks to more easily see us, to attend events, things like that. So we thought that the added benefit of having that street frontage made South Street a little bit more accessible than the Harding Street site. Next, we looked at both wind and pollution. And I'm gonna just talk about the pollution study first. So with the Harding Street site, again, that northern site, it's literally next to the Green Line extension. And by nature, because it's next to these train tracks, we know that runoff pollution is going to be a concern with any storm water. which as an urban farm, we really don't want to have exposure to. So naturally, just by pollution alone, runoff pollution alone, the Harding site was definitely the least ideal. And when you think about just air pollution and noise pollution from the train right next to our farm, that's going to be affecting our teens that are working there this summer when we want to host events, our farmers market, that kind of thing. So the South Street site, thankfully, it's still on a street. There's always going to be naturally, as an urban farm, some sort of, like cars and things like that. But being next to the train is definitely not going to be ideal for us. So in terms of pollution, Harding Street site for sure was the least optimal for relocation. Now, when we looked at wind, Sasaki designers identified that there's like a pattern of northwestern winds. And as you can see kind of depicting here in this image, they're kind of like flowing down. And what we discovered with the South Street site is that with the current master plans, there's like a wind tunnel that would be developed between the large buildings that they're currently building, which could actually create wind gusts that would affect our farm. And while some wind is actually beneficial, for instance, it can help prevent mold caused by humidity, it can avoid some pests. We don't want huge wind because it's going to affect our crops, right? And so in this study, part of the master plan shows that the areas of that wind tunnel are actually, there's proposal to have trees or some sort of green spaces there. And we think that as long as the master plan fulfills that space with trees, that will actually be a mitigating effect, which shouldn't be as much of an issue with these like northwesterly winds. In addition to that, Sasaki also suggested that on the north parameter of the South Street site, if we were to plant a series of trees along that parameter, it would be an added mitigating effect, which wouldn't affect sun. So like our exposure to sun, it wouldn't create a shading effect. So we saw that as a plus in addition to, in the event that these trees wouldn't be planted in that wind tunnel area, we could still take another measure that could help mitigate without affecting shade in that second space, again, the South Street site. Finally, we did studies around sunlight. And so Sasaki looked at the average amount of sunlight between March through October, because that matches our growing season. And they looked at both sites in a variety of different ways. Like the big overview here is that the South Street site receives significantly more sunlight and less shadow currently, but we'll go into the next slides. However, with current master plan designs, which are those orange buildings that you see to the left here, those are going to be proposed to be built in the next 10 to 15 years. If they are built, that is likely to cause significant shadow on that South Street site. So that's something that we have to be mindful of is these, okay. Next slide, okay. And this is just a little bit more detail on this sunlight site, essentially saying if those buildings that are proposed get built, you're gonna have way more shade actually than the Harding Street site. So if there's something that we can do before those plans are fulfilled that you can advocate for, then South Street site is definitely gonna be the site to go with in terms of exposure to sunlight. And again, that's kind of just reiterating the same, showing you if the developers wanted to push back that area of the building and build it somewhere else, that would provide groundwork with enough of the sunlight that we hope to have. Yeah, right. And just with large scale sort of summary of what these site studies found was that South Street site was definitely the most optimal. It met most of our environmental needs with a mind or a note to know that wind gusts are definitely an issue, to make sure that master plans retain those trees or to plant trees on our farm to mitigate any issues with wind. And then second is to advocate for a change to those proposed buildings so that we can retain enough sunlight for us to be able to grow optimally on the South Street site. And again, this is kind of the repeat of what the findings found, with an added note that the developers can actually do much more in-depth study sites. So having them actually do the wind and the shade studies at the South Street site, the optimal site that we would, ideally relocate to, they can actually determine for sure what the true impacts might be if we were to relocate there. And I know I have such little time, but I'm going to try to be as quick as possible. So for our next steps, much of what Jesse said is we really are using this, all of this information for us to be able to advocate at the table for relocation. And in doing advocacy, we obviously want to involve our community, right? So at this point, because it's been so up in the air, this process, we want to make sure that we're presenting accurate information to our community, getting their input on all these plans, what we've learned from these site studies, so that we can get their input and also additionally look at the central community elements of our farm. Where we end up, we still want to have community gathering spaces. We want to be able to host field trips and educational programming. We want to host a marketplace. Being able to, once we have more accurate information about where we're going, we want to be able to have that input from them to help us refine that vision, essentially. And we would do so with different forms of community engagement, like survey, just through our community events, our newsletters, social media, our green team, who are youth that work over the summer at the farmers markets, different venues for engagement with the community as we move forward. And again, the advocacy piece. We have a lot of information here to bring forward to our development stakeholders to advocate for what we need to study and evaluate if we are moving forward with a specific relocation space. And if we're not, asking for these evaluations for the next proposed site, because we already know some of the essential needs that we have as an urban farm. We also want to continue partnering with designers and organizations and others in helping us refine this vision. What is actually possible? What are the things that we need to think about long-term in our quest to find a permanent space?
Thank you so much. We just want to thank everybody and all the support. It's been a really anxiety-producing process to even get to this point. Working with very little information from various stakeholders has been tough. Our friends at the city have been just amazing. You can see all of those entities. Mayor Ballantine came in her first few months in office and came to us and expressed her support. And we're just so lucky that we have that. We also want to thank Boynton Yards. We will be working with them closely as we get to a solution here. And just our community supporters. Everybody's been asking questions and we wish we had answers, but now we have a presentation and tools to advocate for. And especially big thanks to Sasaki for this has just been such a hard thing to approach. And now we have the start and we have everything we need to really dive in here and advocate for ourselves and get a seat at the table. So thank you for your time. Any questions, I think, is next.
Thank you. That was a great presentation. Lunch will be here in 25 minutes, so it's going to be a little bit over. I tried, but it was such a big order. So apologies that it will be a little over. Any questions? And we just have time for 2.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I was wondering if there has been a conversation yet about the implications of putting a farm on a previous junkyard site. Has there been any soil analyses? Have you discussed the potential of a brownfield and ways that you're thinking about mitigating those effects if we're going to be eating food out of that soil?
I run out of science language quickly, so I'll probably have to pass it over. But we currently are on the junkyard site. I think if we can, well, I won't mess up the slides to go all the way back, but all of our beds are raised beds. I think there has been soil analysis throughout time, and it's been terrible. So there's a lot of environmental concerns with that. Both sites that are included are generally in the same spot. We're thankful for that. We're glad we're not moving too far. But it's something that we'll have to revisit, and there's no specificity on who's going to design the place, who's going to fund the place, what studies are going into it. So that's a great question, and we'll bring that to them. These are definitely things we need to think about. We've thought about everything on top in the environment, so we also need to make sure we're on our side.
Thank you for that. Everything in Somerville, if you're eating any food from Somerville, it's been capped and put on top because the entire city is a brownfield. But that brings up a really good point for funding, is that there's the potential for brownfields funding.
Hi. So I was just wondering, since everything's sort of still so up in the air, if you ever had a chance to sort of think about like the infinite possibilities of this new site move, and if you could sort of dream up anything to be there, what would it be?
And while you think on that, I'm going to see if Bianca's question can go too, and then we can do them both.
Sure. Yeah. Similarly, is the development going to be housing? Do you know if it's like expensive housing? And okay, gotcha. My question was basically like, are you also open to other sites that aren't just these two sites? Yeah.
Yeah, very supplemental questions. Great.
Yeah, so envisioning what we want on the farm, we have not really this was our chance to really do that and think about it. And the two spots that were sort of in question here are pretty comparable to the current size we have. With one, we didn't mention it because it's an added level of complexity, but one is on top of a stormwater reservation tank, which will take many, 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 many years to build. And that's on the city. And then that just adds more stakeholders and time. So I think it's more of a values question. We really want better community space. Our current space is amazing. We do what we can, but it's very narrow, sort of a 1 tent for events and things like that. But community space and getting that community input about the space. This is Groundwork Somerville's only urban farm. It's really the residents' sort of needs that go first. So we have so much to go. I mean, this could be going on for, I don't even want to think about how long this will go on, but we will get more in depth with what we want. And then other places, yes, this is stressful. We're relying on a lot of people who don't have answers for us. Everyone wants to give us answers, but with the moving pieces, the approval line, it's a mess. When I did meet with the mayor, we discussed potential other sites. They gave me a list of vacant areas in Somerville. We don't want to leave Somerville. That's not what we want to do, but like it's a displacement is happening, and we're hoping to stay as local as possible. I think any other sites we will explore that. This is sort of our first sort of journey into it. It'd be great if we had this developer support. It'd be great if we had funding to really design it and everything like that. But we're definitely looking at other spots, and it's going to take years. So we might have a solution with another spot before we'll have a solution here. So we need to think about that.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, we have Melissa from See You in the Future.
Well, I think, and then drag it. Question for the people in the room. Are you just gonna all stay for lunch and we'll have a nice dinner? Okay. Go ahead, go your whole.
15 minutes would be great.
Okay. So 15 minutes and I'll just
For folks online, we're gonna go about 5 minutes over. Feel free to jump off whenever you need to, but we'll go until about 1:35. Oh, sorry. Grab a ranch. And we're recording as well, so we can share it with you after.
Okay, hi everyone. Welcome, thank you for having me. My name is Melissa Tang. I'm here on behalf of the See You in the Future team. We are a team of artists, designers, healers, storytellers, and our project is called See you in the Future. We have some really incredible supporters, collaborators, the Mayor's Office of Recovery Services, Boston Public Health Commission, as well as local and national advocacy groups like the National Union of the Homeless, the Poor People's Campaign, and Housing Equals Health. And thank you to Sasaki for being the first organization to give us a major grant to allow us to actually dedicate time to do this, because we are all volunteers and do this on top of our other job and life things. So thank you for this. So we are concerned with spatial justice, which is the distribution of resources, as well as how decisions are made through processes. The area that we are concerned with, that we have all collectively been working in for the past 5+ years, is an area of Boston known as Massincass. Everyone had such nice maps. Sorry, it's just Google Maps. So the borders of Massincass change depending on who you're talking to, when you're talking to them. And so as Ben Peterson from the Boston Society of Architecture says, they are contested borders. So it is south of the Boston Medical Center, bordered by the I-93 highway, and just north of the South Bay Shopping Mall. So like a 40-minute walk from here. So just to give a little bit of lay of the land, sorry you can't see, it's so washed out, sorry, but there are so many services and organizations cited here that are dedicated to serving folks who are unhoused or housing insecure, as well as people who use drugs. There are also a lot of government buildings in the area, including the South Bay Jail and the fire department headquarters. So those are all clustered in the north. And this slide shows the distribution of group members who are advising the Boston Planning and Development Agency's new master plan of the neighborhood. So you can see these are spread out more across the area. They're largely business owners, architects, real estate developers, and property owners. So you can also see some of the properties that they own in the area. So for us, this is really a question, and it's a little hard to see on the map, but we just wanted to show you that on the ground, especially since 2019 and even more since the COVID-19 pandemic, there is a tent encampment that changes in size. But right now it's like this somewhat sanctioned encampment in the area. And we just wanted to affirm through talking with people and through research that this area, even from before there were actual tents there, this has always been a place of care where people who are poor and sick have gathered and taken care of each other when institutions have failed them. So for us, as artists, we really believe that stories are important. They shape how we see the past, how we interpret the present, and also how we try to imagine the future and what it can be. So the story of the Massincass has been shaped largely by the neighbors on the South End and Roxbury, as well as the media. And they often perpetuate and exacerbate stigmas that we as a society in America hold against unhoused, drug-using, disabled, poor, sick people, often people of color, immigrants, queer people. Thank you to Sasaki, our team, and the charrette for helping us create this diagram. This shows some of the major news headlines since 2014 that really helped to paint an image of the area for people who didn't go there on the ground. Like a lot of other presentations today, this is a very industrial area and is not treated with the dignity that many residential areas are given. And so for us in turn, we see that the stories of the area have been translated into policies. They've affected the built environment, and they've also affected how resources are allocated and invested into the area. This just shows a time lapse from Google Street View, how over time you see that
a bus shelter was there and then was slowly dismantled. There were decorations in the neighborhood, like banners, and those were replaced by security cameras. And over time, the introduction of fences on fences, and then the arrival of tents in 2019. So for us, this question has shifted it for us, and we're still very much in the middle of doing this project. So right now, what we're interested in is how could healing spaces, or what could healing spaces mean, and what could they look like to the many communities of people who live and work at Mass and Cass? And as designers, how do we collectively imagine and demonstrate what these alternative public spaces can feel like? So this is some of the stuff we are doing that I guess broadly falls under the category of community engagement and research. So we did a lot of historical research. We looked back at maps of the area and saw how the neighborhood, the industrial neighborhood, has developed over time, and how it has always been for the past 300 plus years a site where the city has displaced poor and sick communities of colors too, from people often talk about the closure of Long Island and the moving of that community to the area. But before then, in the 1990s, when the South Bay jail was constructed, 900 people were moved from a jail that had been on Deer Island into the area. And yeah, there's happy to talk more about the history. We also do a lot of mutual aid work. So just trying to show up for people, bringing food, supplies. We would volunteer with other groups that do this and have a much more substantial network than we do. We also, for people who want, we record their stories through audio and video. For us, this is really important as a form of data gathering where people can speak for themselves and share their experiences firsthand. And finally, we host weekly workshops at a local community center called the Engagement Center, which 2 of my teammates helped to design and create starting in 2017. For us, it's really important that as artists, and because we believe in aesthetic justice, we know that the future, a just future, has to also be very beautiful. It has to feel good. So for us, we try to make sure our table always has flowers, it's colorful, we have snacks, we have many ways of engaging with people. So to build on that, every Sunday we go to the Engagement Center and we try to offer many openings for people to come talk with us. So there's always some kind of relaxing low barrier activity where people can come and like coloring is very popular. We have a more involved activity that often involves storytelling, where we ask people to share a story and they can document it in different ways. We have a space where people could just sit down and talk with us if they want. They don't have to do any of our activities, and that's totally fine. That can also be in and of itself very healing. And finally, if people want to record, we have a separate space, often like a table or a chair where people can sit down and share their story, and we have an interview protocol and consent form, and we pay them. We did some research on tables. I won't dwell on that, but just tables are a really wonderful medium for gathering and conversation, and can be healing and just being in community with people. So these are some of our tables. And these are some of the, I guess, outcomes of our workshops where we ask people what they think about the streets. The coloring pages here, where we turn the street into a coloring page and we ask people, what would you change? Some people just wanted to draw flowers, some people colored the walls, some people wrote. This is all fine for us because we're just trying to meet people where they're at and also do community engagement and talk about the neighborhood in ways that feels colorful, it feels joyful, it feels accessible. We also did flowers with some stories if people wanted to share. And so I'm going to stay on this slide. So for us, The activity is more like the secondary thing that we're trying to get out of these workshops. Really, we're there to build relationships with people. We're trying to, because we're going every week, we're seeing the same people over and over. And we're trying to build up to a participatory design process with people. Like, how do you actually get people who are maybe regularly dehumanized, who've lost trust in institutions and outsiders? How do you get people to actually want to design something with you and have faith in the project that you're doing? The table was really just the first we think of as a small spatial intervention in this area. And the next phase of this now is working with people who we have been talking with every week to think about, okay, how do we scale up a little bit? How do we think about a courtyard? So we were commissioned by the Boston Health Commission to paint 3 murals on the back of in the courtyard of the men's shelter in the neighborhood. So these are the 3 sites. We have one giant wall, we have the floor, and we have a fence that wraps around the area. And for us, in talking to people, I mean, you don't have to talk to that many people to know that people don't like the shelter, or it's not popular, but often it's one of the few options that people have. And so how do we not like art wash this space, but really engage with people in conversations about how can this space, despite all of its limitations and potentially trauma, how do we start to talk about what the space could mean to you? How do we talk about the themes that have come up in our workshops, which are care, growth, belonging, and what was hope? We've been talking to people about what they want to see on the murals. These are some of the outcomes of conversations we have with people. And I'm happy to talk more about this, I guess, during Q&A if you want, or afterwards. So these are our themes. And one thing we're noticing is it's hard to talk about these themes because people often, when we ask them, what does hope look like to you? They're like, I don't have hope. So it's how do you enter a conversation? Because we know that at some point, everyone has felt care, everyone has cared for other people. People care about growth. So how do you get them into a space where we can talk about this openly? So we have different ways we ask questions. So what memories do you have of care? What memories do you have of belonging? How do you show care to people in your life? What are spaces and other places that offer you growth or hope? So with the mural, we're really focusing on this second question. So how do we collectively imagine and then demonstrate what an alternative public space can be? It's really important for us in talking to, the community of people at Mass and Cass are so rarely, they're not engaged by planners in the city. And because of the stigmas and the fears that people have in talking to this community, we want to create a space where we can actually invite people in the city into the space. So we're not just sharing the data that we've gathered, but we're actually inviting people into a space that the community has created with us. So we can actually make the case from a embodied place. So now we're working with the Boston Society of Architecture, who are here today, to really think about what does it mean to actually think about an architecture of healing that is conceived of and made from the ground up with community members. And what does it mean to start institutionalizing that? How do we train people? How do we start bringing professional architects into this conversation to actually extend it beyond our project? This is how we're thinking about scale as relational. So that's all. Thank you so much. And thank you, Sasaki.
Thank you so much, Melissa. And the whole team is just, it's been really fantastic to watch the the evolution, I guess, as you've spoken with people and engaged, and it's been really wonderful to watch. Any questions from the group here? I realize I haven't been monitoring the chat. Anna, can you see if there are any questions in the chat? Yeah.
Thanks so much for your presentation. It's so unique. And I'm wondering if there have been like other initiatives that kind of inspired or like you kind of looked at. Like, are there other places that are kind of looking at how do we design spaces for healing and in this, like something similar to this? I'm just curious, kind of, is there inspiration that you sort of look at, or I don't know, case studies or something like that?
Thank you. Yeah, totally. I mean, the immediate inspiration came from, hopefully this doesn't sound conceited, but they built on work from two people from my team who created the engagement center. And so they really learned what it was like to go against the grain to set up a space and how do you advocate for that. But beyond our own team, yeah, for sure. I mean, there's incredible work happening by the Boston Boston Healthcare for the Homeless program in Boston. It's such an innovative group that is right here in Boston. There's a design studio in Boston called the Design Studio for Social Intervention, DS4SI, who inspired this idea of what they call creating a productive fiction, creating a space that embodies an alternative future and inviting people into it to imagine. I'll think of more, but there's plenty I'm happy to share with you.
Not really a question, but just that I echo that it's been really neat to watch the evolution of your, like I was taken immediately from the pitches originally, but then to watch your presentations evolve has been really inspirational. Yeah.
It is really inspiring to see it. Any other questions, thoughts, comments? Yeah.
I'm just curious if you personally have had any experiences when engaging with the individuals at the engagement center that have stuck out to you about like designing healing spaces and things that you've learned.
Thank you. That's a really lovely question. Yes, and it's more of like which story. I think there's one person that was when we first set up, you know, like we first go and we're not really sure what we're doing. This person sat down with us, didn't speak, and just kind of sat with us and asked for a coloring page and was drawing quietly. And when he was done drawing, he just, you know, gave it back to us, said thank you and left, and kept coming back week after week. And we slowly got to a place where he only speaks Spanish. And so but he started talking with Evie, who on our team speaks Spanish. And he told us after about, I think 4 weeks, like, I have so many ideas for this space and no one asks me. And I feel like, for whatever reason today, I feel like I can start sharing with you. I'm paraphrasing, but it was really beautiful to just know that there wasn't anything we did differently week after week. I think it was just that we were showing up, and over time he thought, okay, like maybe these people, they're not leaving. And maybe my ideas will go somewhere. And it was, I think that was just really powerful for me to just know the power of being present in communities, which I think all the projects today demonstrated. And just that, you know, people, we try to meet people when they're ready, and we can't predict that.
Thank you so much. That was very, very eye-opening. Oh, right, I need to go to Now, can you help me, Melissa, go back to that other screen we were on? I think it's just this right here. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. So looking forward, we are so excited to have our design grants pitch night a couple weeks ago, and you'll see some, well, actually not familiar faces up there, never mind, but we have familiar community representation up on this screen here. So pitch night was fantastic. It was June 1st. We were able to do it in our space, which was wonderful. And we were able to bring on a new cohort, which will be starting soon. So here we are with our new grantees for the year. And of course, I don't have them all written down. And Anna is not in the room right now, but we have the Chinatown Community Land Trust, and Lydia representing will be a grantee this upcoming year. The Aini Movement Training and Cultural Center. Yes, please, big round of applause for that. We have a group from the Boston Housing Authority and Northeastern University looking at childcare spaces and specifically at public housing open spaces outside of those units. We also have an incredible team from Roxbury. Oh, there we go. The food is delivered. That's why. And then we have a group called the Harbor Keepers from East Boston. So it's going to be an incredibly wide breadth of kinds of projects that we'll be designing this coming year, and we're honored that we'll get to work with them. Oh, here we go. Educator space. This is Northeastern and Boston Housing Authority. The Survival Guide, and this was Reclaim Roxbury. Building Food Resilience, and this is the Harbor Keepers in East Boston. And this is all up on our website. Improving Open Space in Chinatown, and this is Lydia's group with the Chinatown Community Land Trust. And then the Aini Movement Training and Cultural Center. So congratulations to all of this year's winners. We're very excited to be working with folks, and we'll kick that off in the fall. And I believe that is all we have. So thank you all so much